Senator, thank you for being here. Now, today we're here to talk about affordable housing in Minnesota. And the Minnesota Housing just put out their annual Workforce and Affordable Home Ownership Development Program report. You are one of the senators they specifically mention in this report. So what is your connection to the program?
Well, myself, my own personal background, I am a real estate agent. And as such, I have a deep interest in home ownership and housing across the state of Minnesota. And I am a member of the Housing Committee in the Senate, and I'm also the Republican lead on that committee. So my relationship with the committee, with the agency, with this report is simply the working to get housing affordable for all people across the state of Minnesota.
I definitely think that's something that everybody can get behind for sure. Talk to me about this program specifically. What does it aim to do?
The enactment in statute reads, the purpose of the program is to increase the supply of workforce and affordable home-occupied multifamily and single-family housing throughout Minnesota. In other words, for people in single-family homes or multifamily homes that are going to be owner-occupied, is working to make home ownership more affordable.
Okay. The report came out, you've seen it. What were your main takeaways from the report?
Well, the cost of housing in Minnesota continues to rise, whether it be for home ownership or for rental. And it's crushing family budgets across the state at all levels. And there was certainly progress made. I think there was 123 homes built across the state of Minnesota per this program, and that's a positive thing. However, that doesn't make a dent at all in the shortage, the true shortage that's happening in the supply of housing, the cost of housing that families are experiencing across the state. The reality is there is not enough government money, whether it be this program or similar programs, to solve this issue.
So what can we do then to either improve the program's efficiency to target the areas of need that we're seeing, or outside of the program, just generally make homeownership more affordable in Minnesota?
Well, there was a recent report put out by the Realtors Association that the average age now of first-time home buyers is 40 years old. And 2 years ago, the average age was 38 years old. And if you go back a decade or so ago, it was in the mid to late 20s was the average age. And so the metrics are trending in the wrong direction. And the question is why? Why is housing getting more expensive? One of the major contributing factors for that is government regulation. Government regulation makes it take longer to build houses, takes longer to get through permitting approval processes, and it takes longer and it's more expensive to implement and meet the ever-increasing requirements for code, which are some of the most stringent in Minnesota compared to the rest of the nation.
And I feel like we talked about this last session as well. So what impeded those ideas from, coming to fruition then? Because obviously it's an idea that everyone can get behind.
It should be. It should be a common sense examination and not be partisan at all. That when you look at the state of Minnesota compared to each of the surrounding states, to build a comparable home in Minnesota versus the surrounding states, it's anywhere between $50,000 and $150,000 more expensive to build the identical house in Minnesota, again, compared to our neighboring states. And these neighboring states, we have substantially similar workforce, we have substantially similar, obviously, weather and things like that. So there is no excuse other than the regulation in the state of Minnesota. So why hasn't there been progress? I think that there has been a greater interest by some to put more programs in place to try to have government intervene, when the reality is, just as we see with this report, 123 new homes, that's great. But that doesn't make a dent, and we can't keep looking to government for solutions. Instead, we need to have government roll back the hindrances that they're causing, which is driving up the price of housing.
Well, given that things are trending in the wrong direction, as you say, do you think there'll be an appetite for any of that kind of work this session, or what kind of timeline would we be looking at?
We have an incredibly short timeline this legislative session. From the time we gavel in until third deadline, which is when all legislation has to make its way through all committees, there's only 6 weeks. And so there's a lot of work to get done on a whole host of issues. It is going to be a challenge, no doubt. However, I'm going to be continuing to push for the rollback of some of these regulations to allow the free market to do what it does best, is build more supply. If we have more supply that meets the demand, that will help to drive down prices and make homeownership more affordable for all Minnesotans.
And just as a final thought, why don't you take me through why that is important? Because, you know, for people that live in rentals and things, they might not care as much, or younger people might not care as much about home ownership, but it's something that impacts the entire state, whether you own a home or not, right?
100%. So home ownership, it's the key to almost every other aspect of our life. We need to have stable housing because that influences how well we sleep. If we have stress, we have to have a place for our children to be able to come home to and have stability. It impacts their education. It impacts, again, the ability to find work with having a home to come home to every day. And it impacts everything about us. So one of the things that I recently heard was a podcast, and they were talking about the American dream. If we think about the American dream, it's often said, for decades, the American dream included becoming a homeowner. And in this podcast, they were talking about the frustration that some younger people are feeling, that it is changing the definition, the frustration and the inability to become a homeowner. Now, again, the average age being 40, it is actually altering the definition, and some in the younger generations are giving up. And they're saying they're going to be a perpetual renter, and they're changing their lifestyles accordingly. That, to me, is shocking, it's frustrating, and it shouldn't be. We shouldn't be in a place in this state or in this country where home ownership is so unattainable that people actually are giving up the hope of becoming a homeowner and instead settling to becoming a perpetual renter. That's why it's so important that we continue the cause of working as hard as we can to roll back government hindrances to provide that opportunity for everybody to become a homeowner.
Senator, great conversation. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.